Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The Galactic Empire ignored the warning, then Earth locked the door. The message arrived on a Tuesday, buried among routine deep space signals from the Arecibo Observatory. Dr. Naomi Weston was reviewing the night's data when she noticed the anomaly, a repeating pattern too structured to be natural, too alien to be human. Jackson, come look at this, she called to her assistant, who shuffled over with his coffee. This signal, it's not random noise. Jackson peered at the screen. Looks like interference to me. No, Naomi shook her head, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. The pattern repeats exactly, but with slight variations in the third sequence. That's intentional. By Thursday morning, the message had been partially decoded. A warning broadcast in what linguists identified as a dead language from an extinct civilization called the Myriacs. Do not approach Earth. The species is not as it seems. Earth is not a planet. It is a trap. But the warning wasn't meant for humans. It was meant for someone else. General Marcus Powell stood on the Pentagon's roof, binoculars trained on the sky. The first ships appeared as pinpricks of light, too stationary to be satellites, too bright to be stars. Within hours, they resolved into massive structures, capital ships of a fleet that stretched beyond what telescopes could capture. How many? He asked his aide. 37 capital ships confirmed, sir, hundreds of smaller vessels. They're positioning themselves in a standard orbital blockade formation. Powell's jaw tightened. And our options? Limited, General. Our missiles can't reach that altitude effectively. Air Force reports their systems are experiencing unexplained interference. Navy submarines are awaiting orders. What about the particle cannon projects? Untested, sir. Dr. Lancaster says it might work, or it might cascade and take out our power grid. Powell nodded slowly. Tell Lancaster to prepare it anyway, and get me the president. In Geneva, the United Nations emergency session descended into chaos. Representatives from 193 nations shouted over each other, demands for action mixing with calls for surrender. UN Secretary-General Thomas Reyes slammed his gavel repeatedly. Order, we must maintain order. The Russian delegate stood. Our military intelligence suggests these vessels carry enough firepower to glass the planet. We must negotiate. Negotiate what? The Nigerian representative countered. Our surrender, our enslavement. The Chinese delegate cleared her throat. Our astronomical division has been tracking unusual activity in the Kuiper belt for decades. We believed them to be natural anomalies. We were wrong. Screens around the chamber flickered to life, displaying an image that silenced the room, a massive alien craft retrieved from Chinese deep space monitoring stations dated 18 years earlier. They've been watching us, she continued. This is not first contact, this is a culmination. Meanwhile, in suburban London, network engineer Patricia Blackwood noticed something strange with internet traffic patterns. Massive data packets were being transmitted globally, but they weren't following normal routing protocols. They moved like a pulse, repeating every 8 minutes. Hey Tom, she called to her colleague, take a look at this packet trace. Tom frowned at the screen. That's not possible. These packets are somehow arriving at their destinations before they're being sent. Exactly, something is hijacking our infrastructure. And look at the content, it's changing our data, subtly altering information in transit. Changing what specifically? Patricia pulled up examples. Historical records, scientific databases, genetic research repositories. It's inserting new information everywhere. Across the globe, others noticed too. Hospital computers suddenly displayed treatment protocols for diseases that didn't exist. University databases contained references to historical events no one remembered. Children's toys activated without batteries. In Moscow, a supercomputer designed for nuclear launch calculations began solving equations no one had programmed, printing out solutions in archaic mathematics that hadn't been used in millennia. At Cape Canaveral, NASA's mission control screens displayed a countdown no one had initiated. In the White House Situation Room, President Eleanor Winters studied the reports with growing concern. What exactly are we dealing with here, General Powell? Madam President, this appears to be a full-scale invasion, but, he hesitated. But what, General? They're not attacking, at least not conventionally. They've positioned themselves for planetary bombardment but haven't fired a shot. Instead, they're changing us, our information, our technology. It's as if they're preparing us for something. Dr. Naomi Weston was escorted into the room by Secret Service agents. Madam President, I've completed my analysis of the signal that preceded their arrival. And It wasn't just a warning, it was a distress call from a ship that encountered Earth before and tried to warn others. The language is complex, but one phrase repeats, "They're not what we thought." The president leaned forward, "Who isn't the aliens?" "No, Madam President," Naomi took a deep breath, "us humans." Outside, the alien fleet began broadcasting a message to Earth in 4,200 languages simultaneously. "We are the galactic hegemony. Your isolation has ended. Surrender your world and prepare for integration." But beneath the obvious transmission, buried in subharmonics only detectable by quantum computers, was another message entirely. "Containment breach detected. Protocol Omega initialized. The sleepers must not awaken." In a remote laboratory beneath the Antarctic ice, something stirred in response, something that had waited far longer than human civilization had existed. Dr. Victor Raman watched in astonishment as ancient machinery, predating humanity by millions of years, hummed to life around him. "It's responding," he whispered into his recorder. "The artifact is responding to them." As the machines awoke, a gentle vibration spread through Earth's crust, not an earthquake but a resonance, like a tuning fork struck after eons of silence. Across the planet, millions of people paused, feeling a sudden shiver of recognition, as if remembering something long forgotten. Something ancient was waking up, and the galactic hegemony had just made a catastrophic mistake. Dominic Rivera had been exploring forbidden ruins in the Atacama Desert when the aliens arrived. A former archaeologist turned treasure hunter, he specialized in sites that mainstream science refused to acknowledge, places where ancient civilizations left traces that didn't fit conventional history. "Julieta, you need to see this," he called to his research partner, who was cataloging artifacts nearby. Julieta Ortiz, a linguist with 3 PhDs and a government blacklist to her name, hurried over. "What is it?" Dominic pointed to symbols etched into a metallic panel they had unearthed beneath 20 feet of sediment. "Look familiar." She nodded slowly. They matched the broadcast symbols from the alien fleet. She traced her fingers over the markings, which seemed to shift under her touch. "But these are at least 200,000 years old, predating Homo sapiens." "Exactly." Dominic brushed away more sand, revealing a circular pattern with Earth at the center, surrounded by what appeared to be warning signs. "I don't think those ships came here to conquer us. I think they came to check on us." "Check on what?" "Their prison." Above them, as if in response, the desert sand began to vibrate, forming perfect geometric patterns before settling again. Meanwhile, in New York, United Nations diplomat Faris Nassar prepared for humanity's first official contact with the galactic hegemony. As the chosen emissary, he would speak for Earth, a responsibility that weighed heavily on him. "Remember," his aide Helen Cho reminded him, "show strength but not aggression. We need to buy time while we understand their capabilities." Faris nodded, straightening his tie. "If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead already. They want something else." The meeting location was the UN General Assembly, now transformed by alien technology into a neutral zone where atmospheres and gravity could be customized for different physiologies. When Faris entered, he found 3 representatives waiting, tall, luminescent beings with silvery skin and eyes that reflected like mirrors. "I am Ambassador X Jull of the Hegemony Council," the central figure announced, its voice melodic but emotionless. "Your world has been isolated for reasons of galactic security. That isolation has now failed." "Failed how?" Faris asked carefully. "Your species has progressed too rapidly. Technological advancement from stone tools to quantum computing in less than 10,000 years is unprecedented and violates containment parameters." Faris maintained his diplomatic composure. "You speak as if Earth was deliberately quarantined." It was. The aliens' mirrored eyes showed no expression. "Not to protect the galaxy from you, but to protect you from yourselves." In the observation room, Helen Cho whispered to General Powell, "They're lying. Their body temperature spikes when they talk about containment." Powell nodded grimly, "But lying about what parts?" Back in the Atacama, Dominic and Julieta had uncovered more of the ancient installation. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about human origins. "This isn't just a warning marker," Julieta said, translating more symbols. "It's a monitoring station. According to these records, Earth was designated a crucible world." "Meanings?" "A testing ground, a place where species are," she hesitated, "engineered under controlled stress conditions." Dominic frowned. "They've been experimenting on us." "Worse," Julieta looked up, face pale. "We're the experiment, or rather what we might become is." Their satellite phone buzzed, a message from their contact in government, Dr. Wei Lin. "Get out now. hegemony forces targeting all archaeological sites with anomalous readings. As if on cue, the ground trembled, not from an earthquake but from the approach of something massive. Through swirling dust, they glimpsed a hegemony scout ship descending rapidly. They don't want this information getting out, Dominic realized, grabbing essential artifacts. We need to move. As they fled in their rugged jeep, the installation behind them didn't merely collapse, it dissolved, as if being erased from reality itself. At the United Nations, negotiations had taken a disturbing turn. Ambassador Xjol revealed their true intentions. Earth's quarantine was established because your species carries a genetic anomaly. You were separated to study how it would develop in isolation. What anomaly? Demanded Faris. Your adaptability is unnatural. All other sentient species reach equilibrium with their environment. Humans never do. You perpetually transform yourselves and your surroundings, consuming, changing, advancing without limit. That's called progress, Faris countered. It is called destabilization, Xjol corrected. Your ability to thrive under conditions that would extinguish other intelligence suggests artificial engineering at a fundamental level. The question that has concerned the hegemony for millennia is, who engineered you and for what purpose? In a secure bunker beneath Zurich, the World Science Council had assembled to analyze data from the alien fleet. Dr. Leila Azawa, the leading quantum physicist, presented her findings to the stunned group. Their ships aren't just in our space, she explained, pointing to complex equations. They exist partially in other dimensions. More concerning, they're actively manipulating our reality at the quantum level. Manipulating how? Asked Dr. Hendrik Visser, a neurobiologist. They're suppressing something. Leila brought up a global map showing strange energy fluctuations. These patterns appeared the moment their fleet arrived, a dampening field targeting specific frequencies in human brain activity. Hendrik leaned forward, eyes widening. Those frequencies correspond to parts of the brain we've never understood, regions that appear dormant in most humans. Exactly, whatever they're afraid of, it's already inside us. Back in the Atacama, Dominic and Julieta had taken shelter in an abandoned mining facility. As Julieta translated more of the artifacts they'd salvaged, her hands began to shake. The symbols aren't just a language, she whispered, they're a key. A key to what? To us, she held up a small metallic disc covered in swirling patterns. This contains genetic instructions, a decoder for human DNA. According to these inscriptions, we were designed with dormant capabilities, locked behind evolutionary firewalls. Dominic stared at her. You're saying we're supposed to evolve into something else. I'm saying we already have multiple times, but each time something or someone reset us. She pointed to markings showing a timeline. See these extinction events? They weren't natural, they were corrections keeping us contained. Their satellite phone buzzed again. Hegemony implementing global neural suppression. Artifact activation DETCTED in 37 locations worldwide. Around the globe, strange phenomena multiplied. In Tokyo, an entire subway train vanished for 3 minutes, then reappeared with passengers who insisted they'd been gone for weeks. In Rio de Janeiro, gravity reversed in a perfect sphere for 17 seconds, floating people and objects gently before returning to normal. In orbit, aboard the Hegemony command vessel, Supreme Director Tholis received disturbing reports from the surface team. The humans are not responding as expected to neural suppression, the science officer reported. Instead of submission, we're detecting increased activity in the dormant regions. Tholis's multicolored eyes narrowed. Implement the purge protocol. Sir, the containment treaty explicitly forbids. The treaty assumed humans remained unaware of their potential. That assumption is no longer valid. Tholis turned to the tactical display. Begin calculating trajectories for complete biosphere sterilization. On Earth, Faris Nassar sensed the shift in negotiations immediately. The alien's posture had changed from cautious to threatening. We've done nothing to provoke this response, he insisted. Ambassador Xjol's voice turned cold. Your existence is provocation enough. The quarantine failed. The only remaining solution is elimination. As the ambassador spoke those words, something unprecedented happened in the chamber. The air seemed to thicken, and for a brief moment Faris saw not the alien diplomat but its true form, a writhing mass of energy, ancient and terrified. And he realized with sudden clarity, they're afraid of us, not of what we are but of what we're becoming. In the Atacama, the disc in Julieta's hand began to glow with an inner light. As Dominic reached for it, a voice spoke directly into their minds, not in words but in pure understanding. The key has been turned, the children of Earth are awakening, The hegemony trembles as well they should, they never understood what they were guarding. Research director Priya Kaur hadn't slept in 3 days. Her laboratory beneath the Himalayas, originally designed to study quantum entanglement, had become humanity's best hope for understanding what was happening globally. As governments collapsed and communication systems failed, her isolated facility continued its work, protected by ancient rock and cutting-edge shielding. The patterns are accelerating, she told her small team, gesturing to displays showing neural activity from volunteer subjects worldwide. Whatever the hegemony is suppressing, it's fighting back. Her chief neurologist, Dr. Tund Akafer, studied the readings with concern. These aren't just changes in brain activity. The subject's DNA is restructuring itself, not mutating, reorganizing, as if dormant code is being activated. Priya nodded grimly. The question is, was this capability always part of us or did someone place it there? Before Tund could respond, the facility's sensors triggered an alarm. Something massive was approaching from orbit. Hegemony strike force, confirmed Security Chief Rajiv Mehta, checking the displays. 3 vessels heavily armed, they're targeting facilities like ours worldwide. Priya made a quick decision. Initiate Protocol Vishnu, transfer all data to the backup sites, prepare for evacuation. As her team scrambled, Priya approached their most valuable asset, Subject 117, a comatose man found near an archaeological dig in Indonesia. Since his discovery 3 weeks earlier, he had exhibited unprecedented neural patterns, his mind seemingly operating in dimensions human instruments could barely detect. "We need more time," she whispered, placing her hand on the subject's forehead. To her shock, his eyes opened, revealing irises that shifted like liquid mercury. "Time," he spoke, his voice resonant with harmonics that made nearby equipment vibrate, "is exactly what they fear we have discovered." Aboard the hegemony vessel Inexorable Truth, Captain Kaltharak reviewed the latest reports with growing unease. The human resistance wasn't proceeding according to any known model. Instead of conventional warfare or desperate last stands, the humans were simply changing. "The suppression field is failing in these regions," his tactical officer reported, highlighting areas on the planetary display. "Human neural patterns are evolving to bypass our technology." "Impossible," Kaltharak growled. "Their species is barely out of its biological infancy." "That's what concerns the Science Directorate, sir. According to their analysis, humanity's current state doesn't match evolutionary models. They've advanced too quickly as if they had help," Kaltharak finished, "or design." The tactical officer hesitated before continuing. "There's more, sir. We've detected energy signatures identical to ancient precursor technology at multiple sites on the planet." Kaltharak felt his blood cool. The precursors were considered myths by most of the hegemony, a rumored civilization that had achieved technological singularity before vanishing from the galaxy 12 million years ago. If they had been real, and if they had some connection to humanity. "Show me these signatures," he commanded. The display shifted, revealing a pattern of activations across Earth's surface. They weren't random, they formed a perfect geometric web, like a cage being unlocked from within. "All vessels hold position," Kaltharak ordered, countermanding his previous attack command. "Something is very wrong here." In downtown Singapore, investment banker Han Jiangguo was in the middle of a video conference when he first noticed the changes. Words on his screen began rearranging themselves into patterns that made strange, new sense. He could suddenly understand market movements not as numbers but as emotions, fear, greed, hope, visible as colors flowing through data. "Are you feeling well, Mr. Han?" asked one of his clients, noticing his distraction. "I can see it," he whispered, transfixed. "I can see everything connected." All across the city, others were experiencing similar awakenings. A chef suddenly perceived flavors as musical notes, creating dishes that brought diners to tears. A traffic controller found she could predict accidents minutes before they happened, rerouting vehicles with perfect precision. It wasn't just Singapore. In Buenos Aires, a homeless man began speaking perfect mathematical equations that solved fusion problems physicists had struggled with for decades. In Nairobi, children started communicating with animals, forming impromptu packs with wild dogs that protected neighborhoods from hegemony drones. Back in the Himalayan lab, Subject 117, who now called himself Vishnu, adopting the name from Priya's emergency protocol, explained what was happening. "Humanity was never meant to be ordinary," he told the astonished research team. "You were seated here as a safeguard, designed to evolve in isolation until needed." "Needed for what?" Priya asked. "Balance?" Vishnu's eyes swirled with mercurial light. The universe tends toward stagnation. Intelligence either destroys itself or reaches equilibrium and stops advancing. You were created to be different, to never stop changing, never reach equilibrium. Tund frowned. The hegemony called that destabilization. Of course they did, Vishnu smiled. Because deep in their genetic memory, they remember what happened when they tried to control their own evolution. They reached a dead end, perfect, stable, and utterly stagnant. And who created us? Priya pressed. You did, Vishnu answered simply. Humanity is a closed temporal loop. What you are becoming created what you were, seeding itself across time to ensure its own existence. As he spoke, the facility shook violently. The hegemony vessels had begun their attack. Will they kill us all? Rajiv asked, checking the facility's failing shields. They'll try, Vishnu replied calmly. But they're fighting ghosts of their own making. The more they attack, the faster the awakening spreads. In orbit, Kaltharak watched in horror as his ship's weapons had an effect opposite to what was intended. Each bombardment site became a bloom of strange energy, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. Cease fire, he commanded. All vessels cease fire immediately. Too late, he realized the truth that the ancient warning had tried to convey. Earth wasn't a planet harboring a dangerous species. Earth itself was the weapon, and humanity its triggering mechanism. His science officer approached, face ashen. Captain, we've analyzed the pattern of activations. It's not random evolution, it's a coordinated awakening. The humans are transforming according to a specific blueprint. Whose blueprint? Kaltharak demanded. Unknown, but it bears similarities to theoretical models of how the precursors might have transcended physical form. Kaltharak stared at the viewing screen, watching Earth's continents now glowing with web-like patterns of energy. Contact the Supreme Director. Tell him we've made a terrible mistake. This isn't a quarantine breach, it's a trap. Earth was never meant to be approached. But his words came too late. Across the hegemony fleet, systems began failing as Earth's awakening humans reached out with newly discovered abilities. Some ships lost power entirely, drifting in orbit. Others reported crew experiencing hallucinations or sudden enlightenments that left them unwilling to continue the attack. In a remote Australian outback community, Aboriginal elder Waru had been singing the ancient songlines when the changes began. For him, there was no surprise, only confirmation of what his people had always known, that the land was alive, that dreams shaped reality, that humans were part of a pattern larger than themselves. As he sang, the earth beneath him responded, ancient pathways lighting up with luminescence that had lain dormant for millennia. His voice carried further than it should, resonating with identical sites across the planet, forming a harmonious chord that rippled through space itself. In her Himalayan lab, now partially collapsed from the bombardment, Priya watched as Vishnu walked calmly through fallen debris toward the facility's central chamber. "What are you doing?" she called after him. "Completing the circuit," he replied without turning. "The awakening needs a conduit." In the chamber, he placed his hands on an ordinary-looking rock wall. At his touch, the stone transformed, revealing intricate patterns that matched those appearing worldwide. As the patterns activated, Vishnu's form began to shimmer, becoming less solid, more luminous. "The hegemony fears change because they cannot control it," his voice echoed, though his lips no longer moved. "Humanity embraces change because you understand something they've forgotten." "What's that?" Priya asked, shielding her eyes from his increasing brightness. "That evolution isn't about survival, it's about transcendence." With those words, Vishnu's physical form dissolved into pure energy, merging with the patterns in the wall. A pulse of light shot outward, passing through solid matter as if it weren't there, connecting with similar pulses from activation sites around the globe. In orbit, Kaltharak watched as Earth became encased in a lattice of energy, visible even to normal sight. His instruments detected something unprecedented. Spacetime itself was bending around the planet, creating a bubble of altered reality. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice shaking, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's being broadcast directly into our minds." The message was simple. The quarantine was never meant to keep us in, it was meant to keep you out until we were ready. As those words resonated through the hegemony fleet, Earth's transformation accelerated. Humans worldwide found themselves connected by a network of consciousness that transcended conventional communication. They remained individuals, but also became part of something greater, a collective intelligence that retained all the creativity, unpredictability, and adaptability that made humanity unique. The trap had been sprung, but not as the hegemony feared. Earth wasn't a weapon designed to destroy, it was a crucible designed to create. And what it had created was finally awakening. Jamal Williams had always been different. At 15, he'd been diagnosed with a rare form of synesthesia that let him perceive radio waves as colors and textures. His parents had taken him to specialists, who prescribed medications to normalize his brain function. He'd flushed every pill down the toilet. Now, as he stood on the rooftop of his Chicago apartment building watching the hegemony ships trembling in orbit, he understood why he'd been born this way. He wasn't broken, he was an early prototype. "You feel it too, don't you?" asked Mrs. Abernathy, his 80-year-old neighbor who had inexplicably climbed 5 flights of stairs despite her arthritis. Her eyes, normally clouded with cataracts, now shimmered with the same mercurial light that was appearing in humans worldwide. "All my life," Jamal nodded, extending his hand toward the sky. As he did, the air around his fingers rippled visibly. "They're scared up there. I can taste their fear like copper and ozone." Around the world, others like Jamal, the sensitives, the neurodivergent, those whose brains had always operated differently, found themselves at the forefront of humanity's transformation. What society had labeled as disorders were revealed as evolutionary advantages, first adaptations of what humanity was becoming. In a hegemony command bunker established in what was once Geneva, Supreme Director Tholis faced the first genuine crisis of his 300-year career. The holographic reports from his fleet showed catastrophic failures across all systems. Ships weren't just disabled, they were being repurposed, their technology rewritten at the quantum level. "The containment protocol has failed completely," reported his chief scientist, a being of pure crystalline thought named Ixel. "Earth's transformation is accelerating beyond our models. We are detecting spacetime anomalies consistent with imminent transcension." "Impossible," Tholis hissed. "No species transitions from physical to post-physical existence this quickly. The process should take millennia, not days." "Unless," Ixel suggested carefully, "this was the intended outcome all along. Consider the possibility that Earth is not experiencing an awakening but a remembering." Before Tholis could respond, the bunker's supposedly impenetrable shields flickered. Standing before them as if he'd always been there was Jamal Williams, or rather, a projection of him, his form composed of shifting light. "You should have listened to the warning," Jamal said, his voice oddly gentle despite the circumstances. Tholis reached for his weapon but found his limbs unresponsive. "What are you?" he demanded. "I'm human," Jamal smiled. "Just a kid from Chicago who could always see things others couldn't, but now I'm also something else, a conduit for what we're becoming." "And what is that exactly?" asked Ixel, more curious than afraid. "Something your people tried to become eons ago before you chose stability over potential." Jamal's form shifted, showing glimpses of possible futures, humans transforming into beings of pure energy, consciousness spreading among the stars, reality reshaped by thought. "You called Earth a trap, you weren't wrong, but the trap wasn't for the galaxy, it was for us. A crucible designed to forge something new." In orbit, Captain Caltharak watched in awe as his flagship, once the pride of the hegemony fleet, transformed around him. Corridors rearranged themselves, technology evolved before his eyes, becoming something that blended hegemony science with emerging human potential. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the ship is communicating with me, not through systems, directly to my mind." Caltharak nodded slowly. "What is it saying?" "That we have a choice." The officer looked up, eyes wide with wonder. "It's offering us understanding." Across Earth, the transformation continued, but not as the hegemony had feared. There was no violent revolution, no vengeful attack on those who had tried to suppress humanity's potential. Instead, as humans awakened to their new abilities, they chose a different path. In what was once North Korea, a regime that had brutalized its people for generations collapsed overnight as citizens simply stopped believing in its power. The dictator's commands went unheeded, his threats meaningless against people who could now see the fear driving his cruelty. In the Amazon, indigenous shamans who had maintained ancient connections to Earth's deeper mysteries found themselves vindicated as the knowledge they had preserved for centuries spread to global consciousness. The rainforest, responding to humanity's awakened state, began regenerating at impossible speeds, dead zones blooming with new life. Dr. Priya Kaur, emerging from her partially collapsed Himalayan laboratory, coordinated a worldwide network of scientists now working to understand and guide the transformation. Using their newly enhanced cognition, they developed technologies that healed rather than harmed, that united rather than divided. "The awakening isn't making us less human," she explained to representatives from both Earth and the hegemony. "It's making us more so. Everything that defines humanity, our creativity, our adaptability, our capacity for both great cruelty and transcendent compassion, is being amplified and refined." In the Atacama Desert, Dominic Rivera and Julieta Ortiz stood at the edge of what had been their archaeological site. In its place now rose a structure that defied conventional physics, a tower of light and thought that connected directly to similar formations worldwide. It was never about aliens, Julieta said with newfound certainty. Humanity engineered itself across time, we are our own progenitors. Dominic nodded, watching as the artifact they had discovered, now floating above the desert floor, continued its transformation. A closed loop, we created ourselves. And kept ourselves contained until we were ready, she added, because uncontrolled transcension could have destroyed everything. At the United Nations, or what remained of it, Faris Nassar facilitated the most important diplomatic negotiations in human history. Not between nations, but between what humanity had been and what it was becoming, between Earth and the galaxy that had feared it. We offer neither conquest nor isolation, he told the assembled representatives of the hegemony. We offer partnership. What we are becoming isn't a threat to you unless you make it one. Ambassador Exjul, now understanding the true nature of Earth's awakening, responded with uncharacteristic humility. For millennia, the hegemony maintained order through control. We feared change because we had forgotten how to adapt. Perhaps, we have something to learn from humanity. In Chicago, Jamal Williams returned to his physical body, exhausted but exhilarated by his role as humanity's voice. Mrs. Abernathy waited for him on the rooftop, offering a glass of lemonade as if he'd just returned from a summer errand rather than a confrontation with alien leaders. Did they understand? She asked. Some did, Jamal nodded, sipping the tart drink gratefully. The others will, eventually. Fear takes longer to overcome than ignorance. And us, what happens to humans who don't want to evolve? Jamal smiled gently. That's the beauty of what we're becoming. It's not replacement, it's expansion. You can remain exactly as you are for as long as you wish, or you can explore what else you might become. The choice will always be yours. Across the planet, that choice manifested differently for each person. Some embraced the transformation fully, their consciousness expanding beyond physical limitations. Others changed more gradually, enhancing their existing capabilities without abandoning their humanity. Some chose to remain unaltered, and their decision was respected. In orbit, the hegemony fleet had transformed from an invasion force into a diplomatic mission. Ships that had come to subjugate now remained to learn. Captain Kaltharak, once determined to enforce quarantine, found himself the unlikely ambassador of a new understanding between his people and humanity. We misunderstood Earth's purpose, he admitted to his crew. We saw a weapon when we should have seen a cradle. Whatever engineered humanity, whether it was themselves across time or some ancient precursor, created them not to conquer the galaxy but to revitalize it. Supreme Director Tholis, his perspective fundamentally altered by direct contact with awakened human consciousness, addressed the Hegemony Council from Earth's surface. The first time in recorded history that a Supreme Director had set foot on a developing world. We have existed in stasis for too long, he declared, his words transmitted across thousands of worlds. In our quest for perfect order, we sacrificed the chaos that drives evolution. Earth was never the threat, our own stagnation was. As he spoke, the first human vessels, not built but grown, technology merged seamlessly with consciousness, rose from Earth's surface. Unlike the massive, imposing ships of the hegemony, these were elegant, almost living structures that moved with organic grace. They carried not conquerors or colonists, but envoys, humans who had volunteered to share what Earth had learned, to help other worlds overcome their own stagnation without forcing change upon them. Dr. Priya Kaur, watching the departing ships from her new research center built within a living mountain, reflected on the irony of it all. The hegemony feared we would destabilize the galaxy, she told her colleagues. Instead, we're helping it find a new equilibrium, not through stasis but through balanced change. In the heart of what had been Antarctica, now transformed into a verdant garden unlike any ecosystem Earth had previously known, Jamal Williams stood before the fully awakened planetary consciousness, a swirling vortex of energy and information that represented humanity's collective potential. Are we ready? He asked the entity that was both singular and plural, both human and beyond human. The response came not in words but in understanding. Earth had been a cocoon, humanity the developing organism within it. The galactic crisis had simply accelerated a metamorphosis that was always intended. The awakening wasn't an end, it was a beginning. And as the transformed Earth took its place in a galaxy now faced with its own evolution, the ancient warning finally made complete sense. Earth was indeed a trap, but not for the galaxy. It was a trap for untapped potential, for dormant possibility. A trap that once sprung released not destruction but renewal. The galactic hegemony had ignored the warning. Earth had indeed locked the door, not to keep the universe out but to invite it in on new terms. Terms that promised not the sterile perfection of stagnation, but the messy, vibrant, endless potential of continuous growth. Humanity had awakened, and the universe would never be the same.